Oh, hi. Didn't see you there. I'm sure you're wondering, hey, why is the less attractive and bearded guy from the Crux of the Matter on my screen? And don't they do full clips and episodes on this channel? Well, first of all, that's hurtful. But second, this channel is not just going to be, our episodes from Crux of the Matter. It's not just going to be clips from it. We'll do skits and other occasional stuff here every once in a while. And, we want the YouTube channel to make it worth our audio listeners' time so that they have somewhere besides, just the Spotify and, my stupid Twitter to connect with us. And so that's the main reason that we have this YouTube channel. Don't be shocked if, like, an occasional poll, a comedy skit, lots of other random things that, we'll show from time to time show up on this channel. And so, we're going to have fun once in a while, every once in a while here. I do mid-tier impressions of people. If you listen to the full podcast, you would have heard. Some might even say that my impressions have bloody psychological merit, bucko. Anyway, you may wonder why this video is even being made in the first place. Well, towards the end of November, you may remember a video that was released on our channel titled, Does Atheism Deserve Consideration? And if you haven't watched the channel, you can go watch it right here. But if you have seen it, then you would have known that I think atheism did not deserve consideration. In fact, I think I called it incoherent, evil, and logically bankrupt, is how I phrased it. I gave a long list of my problems with it. In the very end, I capped off by saying, atheism deserves to rot in the dustbin of history. And of course, many people weren't happy about that. We got a lot of emails. The video hit over 100 views. I think it's at 108 views at the time of this recording. And that's despite 13 subscribers and just launching this YouTube channel like a month and a half ago, and launching the podcast not even 3 months ago. And the other thing, come to think of it, is that some people who I don't know got mad at me on Twitter. Imagine that. But anyway, the point of this video is going to be to clarify some of my criticisms of and stances on atheism. But before we really get going, I have to tell you that this video is not an apology video. And the reason this isn't an apology video is because I wrote up the rant before the podcast, which I usually do once or twice. I always have some little thing just so we can have something to fall back on if we want to clip something from the whole podcast. That's how it is. We want to get using YouTube Shorts pretty soon. There's just different ways to get in the algorithm and get people's attention. And so, the words that I wrote for the rant were chosen purposefully, and I know that's going to make a lot of you upset about it, but I chose them for a reason. And so just hang with me here and keep an open mind until the end of this monologue. And then, maybe at the end, I'll change your mind on some things, and on others, maybe I'll change your mind all the way. Maybe you won't change your mind at all, but hopefully this will at least sort of clarify what I was trying to say. So now that crap is over with, let's keep going. So, first off, the way I refer to atheism in the video, I'm referring to it as it's always been referred to throughout antiquity and always classically. I refer to it in the same way, as I said to one of you, that John Locke and Karl Marx refer to it, and pretty much every other writer, how they refer to it. And, some of you watching pointed out that you have these different versions of what atheist means. So let me just get the definition out so it's easy for all of us to understand. Atheism is the proposition that God doesn't exist. That was hard. No, that's literally all it is. That's how people refer to it classically. And some of you watching pointed out that you're atheists and you're just waiting for theists to prove their claim or something along those lines. I don't want to be over the top. And so, and that this sort of idea that atheism is just a neutral ground, makes my rant void. How could atheism be evil if it's just a neutral waiting ground? Some of you who claim to be atheists fit better with agnostics or with other generally vaguely secular groups, one of which I call the Apathetics. We'll have a whole podcast episode on this term that I made up one day. But some of you fit better with these other groups than the positive assertion that God does not exist, and that's fine. I didn't say agnosticism was evil and logically incoherent and morally bankrupt and all these other things that I said about atheism. And so, you're the thing that you do in an argument is that you get down and you try to define terms first. Okay, the way I'm defining atheist is just simply, again, to say it again, the proposition that God does not exist. That's all. And the other thing that a lot of people did was they tried to assert atheism as this neutral ground that didn't require any proving, that you're actually just in the belief that God doesn't exist is just sort of in this vague neutral zone, and from there you could go to any positive belief, but you're just waiting for people to make a case. That's a dishonest rhetorical trick, and that's been invented by the new atheists who, in my opinion, their ideas, rhetoric, and logic are mostly laughable in comparison to all the philosophers of Christianity, all the philosophers of Islam, philosophers of antiquity like Plato and Aristotle. They don't really stack up to anybody. They don't really, not even social commentators like Locke or Rousseau. They don't even stack up to past atheist philosophers like Ayn Rand, for example. And so these new atheists have invented this trick to try and get out of having to prove their position, and I'm not a big fan. As far as my own Christian burden of proof goes, I'm more than happy to do it anytime. We must be ready to make a defense for the hope that is within us at any time, and for anyone who asks. And I think that's 1 Peter 3:15. And so you can find tons of good resources. I've got a whole library back here. If you wanted recommendations into the case for Christianity, I'm more than happy to provide those. We have the full podcast, What is the Meaning? We Found the Meaning to Life is what it's called, episode 4, so you can go and find that. So other than, this little atheism rant, I sort of follow C.S. Lewis's logical track in the beginning of Mere Christianity. I think it's called the not the Shocking Alternative. It's a different part. But, irregardless of all of that, I'm more than happy to make a case for what I believe, but that doesn't absolve you of having to make a case for what you believe. The statement that seemed to bother a good many of you was when I said that atheism was evil. Well, of course it is. From the Christian perspective, when you think about it, morals are not the niceness or meanness of some person somewhere. That person isn't a bad person because I disagree with them. That's not why. Morals are directions for running the human machine that God designed. And so yes, of course atheism is evil. It upsets the natural hierarchy within nature. We are the crown of creation. We're placed a little bit lower than angels. We're below God, and we're above all of nature, all of physical nature. And that's our place that God has given to us. And so, denying the very source of morals itself, of course that's evil. And, it's just, I really want to emphasize that, the first place people's minds go to with evil is like a Holocaust or, kids dying in poverty somewhere, murderers, rapists, all that kind of thing. Those are all obvious examples of evil, but there's more negligent, there's somewhat smaller examples of evil that are still evil. Just because you might think they're an excusable evil, that doesn't mean God thinks it is, and God's the one who designed us. Morals are directions for running the human machine. Speaking of morals, I think two of you separately brought up the issue of the Catholic Church's abuse of children, and I'm not a Catholic. I just consider myself a Christian. I don't really have a denomination. I wouldn't even identify myself as non-denominational. I'm just a Christian. But even though I'm not a Catholic, I still think they're my brothers in Christ. And so I have a little bit of defense to give, because that's kind of a cheap kick to the gonads. First, the prevalence of abuse in the Catholic Church is largely drummed up to make Christians look hypocritical and evil. And I can already hear the objections raised, but I'll just give you an example. Public teachers are 100 times more likely to sexually abuse kids than Catholic priests. If you want a source, I have it ready to go. Second, the Bible's standard on sexuality is bedrock. All sexual activity outside of marriage between a man and woman is evil. And the sexually immoral do not inherit the kingdom of heaven. God's, that it jumped out at me because a couple of you were particularly unhappy with the sexual degeneracy part of my previous rant. Well, God decides what sexual degeneracy is. And, to me, how do you decide what's sexually immoral? Is consent all that matters? What about the age of consent? Can we debate that? Because for me, that's not up for debate. I have a very strong bedrock view of what is right and wrong, because I have a premise that I can build a deductively logical argument off of. Third, the Catholic priests who did abuse children should get castrated or death penalty. I'm not above punishing evildoers. In fact, it's actually biblical to do so. So for all of the people who did, and weren't even taken out of leadership positions, that's bare minimum. I think if you sexually abuse a kid, you are the most degenerate person who could possibly be alive, and so you should get castration or death penalty. I sort of just wanted to note that I actually do want you guys to answer questions about how you decide what is sexually wrong, immoral as an atheist, because I don't think you have a standard. Your standard it could be either age of consent, it could be the procreation and extension of the human race, but I don't know how you come to certain conclusions. You have to have some kind of premise to build a bedrock off of. So go ahead, make the argument. I'm not saying I disbelieve your argument already before you've made it. Make an argument for what you think the standard of sexuality is. That's fine. And that sort of it kind of brings me back to why I even said atheism is evil in the first place. And there are really two reasons. One of them we already visited, which is it upsets the natural hierarchy within nature. Of course, not acknowledging the source of morality is immoral. But the second reason is a little bit different, because it removes the need for purpose and meaning from someone's life, and that is a void. There's this hole that can only be filled by one thing. I think C.S. Lewis's analogy is the best when he says that mankind is like a car, and it's built to run on one fuel alone, which is gasoline. Some fuels will get further than others. Diesel will get you further than putting vinegar in your gas tank. But either way, the engine's going to blow up and your car's not going to go anywhere unless it's running on gasoline. And so, because of atheism just being the proposition that God doesn't exist, it takes away the one part of you that there's this void that can only be filled by one thing. And that can be filled with a great many things. And that's the other thing about atheism, is that there are different things that have to come in and fill that for the atheist. For some atheists, it's politics. For some, it's pleasure. For some, it's old-fashioned paganism. More on that later. And for some, it's just the pursuit of knowledge. But something has to come and fill that void. Something has to be what you're striving towards for your life beyond just your career. Most people have given a little bit of thought to it. So when I said that atheism deserves to rot in the dustbin of history, I meant it with every single word. I have nothing but contempt for atheism because I have nothing but love for atheists. Why would I care for a philosophy at all that takes people made in the image of God and reduces them to, seeking after something else, some of which are secondary goals, which might be okay if they're God-oriented first, like politics, and some of them are you're just running from what you should be doing, and some of them are just pure hedonism, and it's not uncommon for atheists to be hedonists. And so yes, I have nothing but contempt for that kind of philosophy, because I love the people who the philosophy affects. By the way, I use that word again. What do I mean when I say atheism is a philosophy? Well, philosophy sort of is one of two definitions. Either it's the actual study of nature, values, principles behind the universe. That is just capital P philosophy. That's what Socrates does. But there's a second kind of philosophy. The second use of philosophy, the first one I would call capital P philosophy. That's what the first philosophers that you learn about in these introductory philosophy classes, that's what you learn about, capital P philosophy. But the second definition is more like the actual systems of thought. There's these systems that have premises through which people view the world. One of them is Christianity. Christianity is a philosophy. Another is, for example, Nietzschean philosophy. Another would be Marxist philosophy. They are there's a premise that is built underneath. There's some kind of worldview that affects how you see everything else. And so political philosophies, are more about the second kind. And when I said atheism is a philosophy, I was using it in the second sense, not capital P philosophy. I was using the second kind. And it most definitely is. Just because there's not a person or a God at the top of it, that doesn't make it not a philosophy. There's still a central premise to it. It's merely a decentralized philosophy. That's all it is. It's a decentralized philosophy. Why else would people come swarming to a channel with 12 subscribers at the time? Some of them with identifiable symbols representing atheism, like that little A with the swoosh around it. Like 2 separate people came and commented, how could it not be a philosophy? How are you so insecure about your own worldview that you came to a YouTube channel in the middle of nowhere? We're not any recommendations, so it's, I would dwell on that a little bit. So sure, atheism isn't an organized religion per se, despite some of your identifiable symbols. But that's what makes it so pernicious. An atheist could be on either end of the spectrum. Atheism gives us Marx and Lenin, but it also gives us Nietzsche and Hitler. And I know a lot of people are going to complain about that statement, but they don't exist in a vacuum, and it merely proves my point that because atheism takes away the one hole that is meant to be filled, it has to be filled with something else. And people who are atheists and political philosophers who are atheists, Marx said that atheism was inherent to communism. He said that religion was the opiate of the masses, and he didn't just mean Christianity, he meant all of them. Nietzsche said God was dead, so we have to create our own meaning and create the Superman. And both of those are only possible through atheism. One viewer pointed out that just because you're an atheist, you can still be a good person. You won't run straight for Nietzsche or Marx. And they even pointed out, I want to read this off of the paper so I don't butcher the quote. One viewer pointed out that they know an atheist who, quote, believes that the ghost of her grandmother has visited her multiple times to give her advice. Additionally, I'm conversing online with an atheist that owns a healing crystal shop. If I understand her beliefs correctly, she believes that certain crystals affect chakra in our bodies, and in some cases cause our spiritual energy to heal the body. Well, of course! Removing the supernatural completely doesn't work. Even the new atheists who point out how the supernatural is not compatible with atheism in any way, that doesn't stop other atheists from running straight to the supernatural. It's funny to me, you guys, I'm not going to lie. Look at me with a straight face, atheists, and tell me that it's possible for you to believe in ghosts of relatives, but it's incoherent to believe in God or a higher power. Look at me with a straight face and tell me that. For those of you atheists who don't believe in the supernatural, don't you think it's a little bit odd that other atheists run straight back to the spiritual? Isn't that a little bit weird to you? I wanted to read this C.S. Lewis quote that I wrote down. He said, when I was an atheist, I had to try to persuade myself that most of the human race have always been wrong about the question that mattered to them most. Even Richard Dawkins, the ultimate materialist, said that he thought a plausible explanation for the creation of our universe and where the matter that made the evolutionary process and all the planets and all that stuff eventually happen and how we got here. He said it's possible that we were planted here by a super intelligent alien race. The pretzels one must twist themselves in. Try as we might, we still can't move past religion, and that's worth dwelling on, even if it's uncomfortable. So to wrap this up, to all the atheists who both thoughtfully and some thoughtlessly replied to my original comments. Though you may have found my original statements objectionable, I have found that it's actually very profitable to examine what it is you believe about the world around you, what you believe about nature, what you believe about humanity, what you believe about meaning. And I think examining those ideas in your head, there's not very many things that are more worth your time than doing that. Some of you are not really atheists in the true sense, and you would fit better in other secular circles, and that's fine. An ability to say, I don't know, is most often a sign of humility. However, some of you are atheists who don't believe in a higher power, and you've engaged in dishonest logical gymnastics to get out of the fact that you also need a burden of proof. As I said before, I'm more than happy to defend my own, but that does not absolve you of the need to argue your own position. Every person should have a why behind their what. The great problem with the world today is that there are a great many people who have loud professions about what they believe, and very, very few have a reason to the why behind their professions. So, if you watch this whole video, and you still maintain that atheism is not evil, not logically bankrupt, and a perfectly coherent philosophy, then go out and prove it to me. Go out and find all the best arguments from science, from philosophy, from human nature, from history. Prove your position to me. Leave no stone unturned in your pursuit of the truth, because something is only worth believing if it's true. And if you happen to find your position untenable, you know who to contact.